So now let us start our discussion from tables. Like, what are tables? So if you see, tables are actually the building block of the database, right? Every database is nothing but collection of tables, right? Tables and relationship within the tables. That's what constitute a database, right? And now, what is a table? We all know table is basically a collection of rows and columns, right? So here, if you see, I have taken a dummy example. So I have called this table as employees table, right? If you see, it has few columns, right? Like ID, name, designation, and salary, right? This is what a table is, right? And within each column we have few entries, right? Like, for example, right? And for each column we have certain rows, right? So for row 1 we have ID1, there is a particular name, right? And it has a particular designation, and it has a value of salary, right? And yeah, it's not always mandatory to have all the values with us, right? Some value can be empty, which is represented by null in database, right? So if you see, for row number 2 we don't have a value for salary, and for row number 3 we don't have a value for designation, right? So this is what a real world table would look like, right? Now for each column we have a particular type of data, right? We cannot store anything that we want in any order, right? So the first item has to be ID, the second item has to be a name, right? The third ID has to be a manager, right? And this column has to be a salary. So in database we have the concept of data type for a particular column. So in this data type I can only store string data type, I cannot store number, right? Similarly, in this data, in this column I am supposed to store salary, that is a number, so I cannot store a string here, right? So when it comes to a database, each column is supposed to adhere to a particular type of data, right? I cannot randomly put any data type into any column. Okay, so that was the theory part, right? Now let us see how we can create our own tables inside our database, right? So for that we have the SQL command, right? So that's what we will learn. So the command is, it is create table, right? And I will give the table name. So I will say employees. Okay, then this bracket, and it should end with a semicolon, right? And within this I have to define my table, what my table would look like, what are its columns, and for each column what is the data type that I have to specify, right? So my first column is my ID column, right? And I am saying it should be of type int, right? After that, comma, right? Then second column I want it to be called as name, right? And what data type I want it to be? It is a string data type, right? So here in database we call it as varchar, right? Which means, I think, a variable character, and I have to give it a value. That means this name can hold 200 characters, right? Again, comma, next column definition, right? I will say designation, right? What should be the data type of designation, right? Also here I want it to be varchar of 200, right? Comma, then what I can do, I'll add a value called salary, right? Salary, what I want it to be, I want it to be of type integer, right? Now for this example I have only used integer and varchar, but there are lots of data types and eventually we will look into all of them. But for now, just for sake of this example, I have taken 4 columns, each of them have two different data types, integer and varchar, right? Now this would work. Okay, so it has to be ended with a semicolon, right? Now there is a good practice what we usually write. See, usually we don't write script manually in the editor, right? So it usually runs in some type of automation, right? Either through a migration script, right, or an automated script that runs. So what I can do is create table. This will work. But what if the table already exists in my database, right? So it is a best practice to add if not exists, right? Create the table only if it doesn't exist, right? So that if this script runs again and the table exists, it will not throw abrupt errors, right? Which obviously no one wants in, production or anywhere, right? So this is the command, create table. If not exist, it's a good practice, you should add. Then your table name, then your column name, data type, your column name and data type, right? Like this you can add. Now I will run this one and we'll see what happens. So I'll say control enter, right? So if you see this message, it has created the table now, right? Now the table is created, right? But how I will know, like, what kind of table is created? Did it create according to my definition or did it create something else, right? So I'll remove this one, right? And I will say DESC, that means describe. Describe what? Describe my new table, which is employees, right? And semicolon, it has to end with the semicolon, right? And to run this one, I will say control enter, right? Now I got my definition. One thing I can do is move this to here, right? Okay, this might look better now, right? So if you see, I added a field called ID, which is of type int. For now, you can ignore these values. We will take a deeper look into what is this, what is null, what is default, all these things. We will take a look into that later. For now, what I created ID, which is integer, name, which is varchar, designation, varchar, and salary int. Okay, that means this describe table command will describe the table for me. Now we'll check the next command related to table, that is drop table employees. Now what this will do, obviously it will drop the table. Be very careful when you are running this command. Only if you are absolutely sure that you want to delete the table, that's when you should use this command. This is irreplaceable command, you cannot get the table back, right? So be very careful. If you are using a production database, avoid this command. Okay, I'll not run this one. Just for your reference, I have dropped the table, right?